Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. I hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Welcome back to Valorant News, and a massive announcement yesterday from Riot Games as to the entire partnership structure of the VCT going forwards. 10 teams per region to start, with additional teams qualifying through the Challenges region. This is pretty much as perfect as it gets from a franchise structure. We're going to dive into it all today and explain what this exactly means for the next several years of Valorant competition. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. Let's hop straight into things. Of course, the initial discussion was that there was going to be big news with regard to the tier 2 scene, because that has been the big question of the last few days. The idea is when you franchise a league, or when you partner up a league as they're doing right now with teams that effectively get chosen to be part of the league no matter how well or badly they do, that's not necessarily the case here, which is a big difference maker between this partnership league and to other franchise leagues, as we'll see here in a second. But the idea is that generally the tier 2 scene can suffer. A lot of organizations that would like to get involved in the tier 2 side and try get into the top side, they can't do that because they either don't have the capital or the league is restricted in that sense. So we were really hoping that the tier 2 scene wouldn't die. We've seen already many organizations leave and dip out and drop their teams to say, well, look, we just can't really afford it. And that might still be true for some of them, but I'm sure some of these organizations will now return in due course. This is how it works. So this is the International League. These are the leagues that we've been talking about for the last several weeks. 10 teams per region, 10 teams in EMEA, 10 teams in the Americas, 10 teams in the Pacific region, but then there's the Challengers side. So this is the tier 2 as it currently stands, but incredibly enough, the Challengers teams, the best of them from each region, can actually qualify for the International League and play with the teams that are officially partnered. This is not something that's possible in pretty much every other franchise league, because usually the teams have to pay to enter it. In the Call of Duty League, they have to pay, what, $25 million to enter the league. I think in the LTS it was, what, 10 million initially, and now it's probably a bit more than that, but you've got to pay to get in. Therefore, you can't really allow teams that haven't paid any money to qualify for your top tier circuit, because, you know, obviously it's kind of unfair on the teams that paid all the cash to get into that exclusive league. However, in the VCT's case, it's not franchising in that traditional sense, it's partnerships, right? The Riot chooses 10 teams for now in each region that they want to partner up. And look, down the line, if they don't like those teams anymore, or they don't like what they've done for the scene, they can stop their partnership and bring in a new partner, which actually may well happen down the line with some of the teams that qualify. Let's say the Guard, for example, don't qualify here or don't get chosen as a partner this time, but let's say they build a dominant Challengers team, they qualify next season to the professional circuit, and then Riot thinks, actually, yeah, the Guard are doing a great job, and I don't know, Cloud9 or some organization that's actually that we did choose to partner that isn't really doing that great of a job, maybe we'll drop them out of the league and bring in the Guard full time, which is an option that Riot have open to them now, because it's not like the organization just pays and they get the spots. It's Riot's prerogative as to which organizations they choose. So I think honestly it creates a much better structure for us as fans, and also for the tier 2 scene to actually be able to qualify, because this is not something, to be honest, I expected to see, and it's pretty much the best I think realistically we could have hoped for. So this is the explanation that Riot come out with in the article, and this is the full graphic that describes the way things are going to be structured. So yes, global events once again, that's the top tier, that's the Masters, that's the Champions. The teams that qualify for that come through the international leagues. 10 teams from each region, 3 new leagues, the best teams from each of those leagues that qualify through, you know, we imagine at LAN play potentially in LA or something for the North American League or whatever, or just the Americas League, right, because it's North America and Latin America and South America. The best teams after each split, I guess, will qualify for the Masters event, and then the best teams at the end of the year will qualify for Champions, as it presently is. But those 10 teams in each region are going to be selected and then can field the roster going forwards. Now, the awesome thing is here, they're actually bringing in an in-game competitive system, like a new ranked play type thing, where players can actually kind of prove they're good enough to get into challenges. So I think they're working on that. But the main thing here is that challenges will now cover more players in more countries and more regions, and the best teams from the open qualifiers in challenges will be able to get into the international leagues if they prove to be good enough. So this is how the regions work. If you guys are unfamiliar, the Americas, NA, LATAM North and LATAM South and Brazil, and then EMEA, of course, all these countries. The Pacific, of course, looks like this, but there's 21 different challenger leagues in all of these regions. So yeah, there's a lot of VRLs, effectively the regional leagues, where teams through open qualifiers can prove they're good enough and then potentially get into Challengers Ascension, which is the next up. So effectively, out of the 10 teams that are presently in the league for next season in each of the 3 different leagues across the world, there are going to be additional teams joining them through Challengers Ascension. So the best teams from Challengers every year will go to a Challengers Ascension tournament, one for EMEA, one for Americas, one for the Pacific, specific, and the winner of that tournament qualifies for next season's league. This is something which, of course, is completely unexpected from, coming from a Call of Duty background. That's not how the CDL operates, right? You can't just qualify for the league. You've got to pay 25 million to get in. So this is the structure going forward. And first of all, I'm impressed here that Riot are planning out till 2028 and potentially beyond. So for this season or for next season, there's going to be 30 total teams, 10 per league. Then the Ascension champions from each region come through and they get brought up for 2024. So that makes 33 teams. And the teams that win at those Ascension events, the Challengers Ascension events, they get promoted for 2 seasons. So that organization that owns that team will be in there for 2 years. And then after they're in there for 2 years, they will then effectively just get demoted again because, look, they weren't officially partners. They don't get to stay for that long. It could be tough if that team is dominating. But at the end of the day, if that team qualifies through Ascension and dominates the actual top circuits, then those players will get picked up or potentially bought up by another organization. Or Riot might decide, well, look, this organization has done a great job. Let's partner them and stop our partnership with another team, depending on how the contracts work on the partnership side. So look, okay, they might only get to stay there for 2 years. That's still quite a long period of time, in fairness, for those players to prove themselves. And generally, it's just great news for the Challengers ecosystems. This happens every year, right? So effectively, the team that wins the champions then gets promoted for 2 years. Therefore, every season, there's additional teams coming through. So you get to, 13 teams by 2026 per region, and 14 teams, and that's where it caps out, right? So at this point, there's going to be 42 teams total, and that is the plan. 14 teams per international league, 10 teams, of course, that were there initially, and then 4 teams that have kind of been promoted over the last few years that end up staying in and potentially get brought on as partners. And actually, what they mention here is in order to keep up these numbers increasing, then there's actually 2 teams per year promoted into the international league. So from 2026, there's the 2 winners of the champions get promoted, and therefore it keeps going up to a maximum of 14. So that's the plan that they've outlined over the next several years. So a maximum of 42 teams by 2028, 30 teams starting next year. Honestly, I think for a franchise ecosystem with the concerns that we had, this is probably as good as it realistically could have been, looking at the other franchise ecosystems that exist. Especially, I thought this was pretty cool as well, that the spots that actually are obtained by these Challengers teams will be protected from poaching, right? If you're an organization that, if you're a Brimstone Gaming, right, or if you're a Moist Esports, or, an organization that isn't particularly well known, with not that much capital or resources, if you were to actually qualify through Ascension, a big organization might just say, okay, let's just poach you out. We're just going to drop our team. A TSM might say, okay, our team's terrible. We're just going to drop them and buy your entire team out. Now, that apparently isn't allowed under the poaching rules. So, effectively, the big organizations aren't allowed to tamper or poach with these organizations that initially come through. They can, of course, eventually end up buying out players and stuff like this, but there is a protection in place that these organizations that qualify can reap the benefits to a certain extent, rather than just getting their players bought out, and that's kind of that. So, thought that was pretty cool news as well on that side of things. This also to mention because, of course, as it's currently been announced, 10 teams per region. I think some would prefer that it starts out with 12, right? What if it starts with 12 and then over the next 4 years ends up at 16? I think that would be probably better than ends up at 14, because 14, bit of an odd number. 16 per international league, I think, would be better. It makes it better for your brackets. 16 is just a nicer number to work with for tournament type stuff than 14 is. So, some investors want more spots now. So maybe, depending on how things go, they might end up expanding that initial 10 up to 12. Seems unlikely because they've announced it all at 10, but they might change it to 12 depending on how things go. So it's still a possibility that it could go up to 12 before even next season begins. But pretty cool stuff. That is, of course, the thing to mention, right? The partner team selected this year will not be demoted, but down the line, if Riot chooses to go down a different route in terms of who they want to partner, then partner teams that are currently partnered could then actually leave the league, right? Which isn't really a possibility in regular franchise sports because, you pay in 10 million, you pay in 25 million. The only way you leave the league is if you have to sell your spot. Whereas Riot can actually say, because they're not paying in, because actually Riot are paying them, Riot can decide, well, look, if we don't want you in the league anymore, we can just kick you out effectively and get a new partner team in. Whereas in the other side of things, there might not be too much incentive for organizations that have paid in to really keep delivering for the esports, because, they're just waiting for their return, and it's not that the league can exactly kick them out. Whereas in this case, all these organizations have to keep performing and keep delivering and keep investing in the scene, because if they don't, Riot could just 1 year say, well, look, we don't want to part you anymore, we're going to get this organization in instead. So does it mean that there's a lot of competition to actually stay in the professional and the top side of the league here, which I thought was honestly pretty damn cool. So definitely intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hopefully the explanation I've done today helps to at least a certain extent. A couple of things to mention mention before we finish out here some reaction to this actually from many players. G says there's no more excuses for tier 2 organizations to not try, right? Because if you're a tier 2 organization and you can potentially build a team good enough to actually qualify through Ascension into the International League, like, why would you not give that a go? Even as Zelta says, I feel like this is such a healthy ecosystem based on what has currently been described. Even as Zekan says, can the tier 2 orgs now re-sign their teams now, or what's going on? Because a lot of organizations pulled out, and now it's like, well, look, they've got a chance. Now, like, did they pull out for the reasons they said they pulled out, because the tier 2 scene was going to die, or did they pull out because realistically they don't have the capital and the resources to actually fund a team at this level? We'll see based on which organizations come back over these next few weeks. And even Sentinels trucking a jab in already. Hey, look, TSM, there's still a chance to qualify, saying that, yeah, maybe TSM won't get selected for franchising after all, or for the partnerships after all, and Sentinels themselves are pretty confident that indeed will be the case. This also to mention on OpTic, an organization we do expect to get partnered next year. They are flying to Poland for their boot camp. That was we talked about a few weeks ago that OpTic are boot camping ahead of Champions. That's where they are right now, getting some good practice in. I believe Exeter also over there in Europe as well. And even Trainer has been announced as OpTic's Valorant analyst for Champions. They've done this last year as well, and they brought in like a Jovi. I'm not sure if he's there for Champions or where he was exactly for, but I think he was actually maybe for OpTic earlier this season. But they've done this a few times, brought in some new analysts. So, you know, Trainer apparently is going to be the go for OpTic Valorant here. Previously Luminosity, previously Saw Gaming, both organizations that have actually dipped, I believe, from the Valorant system. So maybe they will return in due course. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy it, hit on the like button. Tells YouTube gods, that's a good video. Others like you should see it as well. And help grow the competitive Valorant community. Thank you as always. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.